Hi everyone, this is Genealogy with Gary, and over the next several months, maybe even longer, depends on how long people want to hear this, we're going to be researching genealogy or family history, and I'm going to give you guys my expertise, offer you my expertise, tell you some things that can help you on your journey. It's a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed dealing with family history, and I wish you guys much success. It is fun. It's frustrating at times, but I think it's really a fun activity that you can get a lot out of. And I've been doing this since 2013. Now, the reason I started was actually a promise from my grandma. And what happened was back in 1986, when I first graduated college, I went with my grandma to a luncheon. She went to a luncheon with retired mail carriers, and she introduced me to the group. When she introduced me, she said, "This is my son who graduated as a history major, and he's going to write the family history book, aren't you?" I kind of looked around. I said, "Well, what can I say? Your grandma put you in a tight spot." So I made the promise right there to her to write the family history book. Now, years went by, and I didn't do that. I'd listened to her stories when I was young, but I didn't write them down. And I think that's a real big regret. I never wrote it down. I didn't record them, the stories. I wish I had. And that's one thing. Once the old folks pass away, you lose history. You'll never get it back. So my advice to you younger folks is write down the history. Record it. At least record it. If you don't feel like listening to us, okay, just clip the recorder on. And later on, you'll say, it was a pretty interesting story. Maybe now I'll listen. But I didn't do those things, and when my grandma passed away, I guess guilt was the thing that really just drove me. I said, I've got to do this for her, do it for my family. And it's really, it started out as kind of drudge it, okay, I got to do it for grandma. But it got to the point where it got very interesting. And the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn about the history. And I hope that happens with you guys. I think right now we've got the coronavirus epidemic. Many of us are probably starting to climb up the walls. Maybe you're like me. I've painted the house, fixed up some things that needed fixing. And some of you are thinking, well, what else do I do with my time? Well, why not do family history? I've seen the commercials for all these companies. Maybe look into it. And well, I wish you success. Send me messages. I'll answer what I can to help you out with your journey also. Okay, but I can tell you it's been a lot of fun. And by the way, if you're wondering why is he wearing a hat like this and shirt, I was born in South Dakota, and the hat is more of a Spanish cowboy hat that I found out from my research that I actually have 12 of my ancestors went with Don Juan Oñate on the expedition from Mexico to New Mexico. And they were the first colonists in 1598 of New Mexico. On my mom's side, I found out that I have relatives, or I have ancestors who fought in the American Revolution. So it's been a very interesting research for me. I've really enjoyed it. So our first thing today that I want you to kind of think about is, as we just get started, this is just a first day, is try to think like, what is it you want out of this? When you're looking at family history, what are your goals? Do you want to make a book? And that's what I did. I made a family history book. Maybe you want to do something like, I have a huge chart here. This thing goes all the way back to 1598. I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not. You can see the professionalism of this YouTube video here. But I made a circle graph, and this thing is in my grandma's family. I don't know if you can see that. I mean, it's a huge one. And I made this myself because I couldn't find one that went back 13 generations. And I'll give you some bits of advice so you don't. I mean, you can make one yourself, but there's a lot easier ways to do it. I didn't find out until after I made it. A lot of work. Glad I made it, but there's easier ways and probably better looking ways than I did mine. Perhaps you want to make something like this. And why do people look at family history? Well, in the early days, a lot of people, they stayed in the area where their families lived. Like, I know my aunt, now she did genealogy work for 20, 25 years. My Aunt Pat Beeble. And she was a great genealogist, real interesting lady. And she loved telling us the stories about this. I remember that she would come, when she came to see us, she always had start out with an interesting story. She goes, "Did you know you had an ancestor who did this? Crazy so-and-so." Or, she always made it interesting. And I think that's hopefully, that's something as you're trying to give out this information, that you remember, we got to make it interesting for the other people, because if it's just dates or names, people aren't going to be that excited about that. But I guess one of the things we want to look at is, what is your goal? Why do you want to do this? Do you want to make a book? Do you want to make a kind of like a big circle thing that I made there? Do you just want to find out because you say, "Hey, where did I come from? I'm wondering about this now." And generally it happens when you get a little bit older like us, and I'm going to take the hat off, I'm getting kind of hot, as you get gray hair. Although we do have some young people that like looking at genealogy, which is really cool. I know I didn't start looking at it till I was older. Maybe it's because, when you have a family, that's not really it's not your number one priority, is to look at your past. But perhaps some of you are thinking, well, I'm getting up there in age, and you're thinking, at some point, I'm going to be gone, and the whole family history is gone. Who's going to carry it on? How are my great-grandkids going to know about our history? So I understand that. I think that's one of the things that drove me with this is when my grandma passed away, we heard some stories, but very few. And we just didn't know much about the family history. There wasn't much there. So many of you are driven for that. You want to know. Some of you love history. And by the way, to be a genealogist or to work on this, you don't need a history major. They do have classes in genealogy. You can take them. I never have, but you can. There's people that do offer that. And it doesn't take any special knowledge. It just takes really just a desire to look at your family history is all it takes. Anybody can do it. In the old days, my grandma had to go to Salt Lake City. She spent money and had some professional genealogists look it up. And they did a good job. That's some information. But in today's world, we have so much access to information. And over the next few weeks, I'll show you where to access that information. But there's several websites that you can access that information. You don't have to go to Salt Lake City anymore. And when I say Salt Lake City, the reason why Salt Lake City, the Mormon Church decided, be an interesting story. I'm sure there's an interesting story as to why they decided to make that as their mission, getting family history. But they have so much of the church records there. They have just an incredible amount. Now it's online. So you can go to things like Family Search. You can go to Ancestry. I think we'll come up with some of the other named ones. I know MyHeritage, 123, and they got several other websites available. You can access literally millions of documents. You can get access to that, and you can get it worldwide, not just the United States. So you have that access. You don't have to be a professional about it. And one thing you'll find out about folks in genealogy, we love to discuss it. We love to help people out as they're looking through this. There seems to be kind of like a common fraternity, a group of people that we really enjoy looking at this stuff. And it's not like the drinking fraternities in college, but we're a fraternity group. I guess many of us are older now. But enjoy this. And just, the first thing I want you to think about for today, I'm looking at my notes here, is number one, just think about why do you want to do this? And kind of give you some idea, what do you want out of it? Or do you want to, again, write a book, make a chart showing your family history? Do you want to let your kids know, your grandkids, and have some goals? Is it number one, do you want to find out if you were related to somebody famous? I know for many years my grandma used to say we were related to Ponce de Leon. She said, I don't know how, but she felt we were. Well, I haven't been able to get that link, but I found we're related to some very other interesting people. We have interesting background, really neat background, and I wish she had been alive to find that out. So some of us want to be related to somebody famous. Sometimes we do this just because of a knowledge. We just want to know where we came from. Why did my family go from one place to the other? I'm sure that my kids would ask, why did we go from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, beautiful beach, got Lake Michigan, a little bit cold. Then we went to the desert of El Paso, Texas. And there's an explanation. I'll give that to them. But when you can find out about why your relatives did things, some of you might be asking that. Why did we come from Europe? What year? What drove us here? Pretty interesting stories there. And this is where you start getting into history. That's one of the neat things about this is somebody say, I was never into history. When it's about your family, you become very interested. You're saying, well, why did my family come from Ireland, for example? They had a potato famine. Well, why did they have a potato famine? And you start digging into more things, and it gets very interesting. There are some people that want to make money. You say, I wonder if I was related to somebody famous, maybe I should get part of that money. I have a friend who always told me that he was, his family was related to people who owned the original land grants in New Mexico. And some of that was stolen, and they're fighting for that money back in the U.S. government, U.S. court cases. I don't know if they'll ever make money. Well, believe it or not, I found out I was also related to that group too. His name was Bartolome Baca in New Mexico. And if they win, I figure if they win, I'll get $1 or $2, something like that, if there goes to court. But some of us, I think we watch TV. We see the neat shows, like they have an Ancestry show, and it's just something you just want to know. I think it's just it's out there, and you want to get to know it. Other people may want to. They love history, and it is interesting. Well, I'm a history major. I should like it, okay? But what might be some other reasons here? And it's something that in the past people valued was their family history. I think that people in the past knew more about this because I was telling you about my Aunt Pat earlier. Her family has lived on a farm for like 6 generations or so. The farm has gone from one family member to the other. So they pretty much stayed in the same area. They know their history pretty well. But many people in America move, and they move a lot. Okay, so like I was born in South Dakota, moved to Montana, then moved to Wisconsin. That's where I went to school. I graduated. Then we moved to Houston, back to Milwaukee, back to El Paso. And this is really where a lot of people in America, that's their lives. We don't live with where we grew up many times. We got a job, moved somewhere else. And when we no longer live where we grew up, there's something we lose. I think there's something to be said. It's nice if you could live where you grew up. I feel a little bit jealous of those people because, it seems like they're a little more grounded. They know their background a little bit more, where I have to do a little bit of research. But, perhaps that's the reason why some people do this, because they want to know, like, where did I get my nose from? My eyes, ears, which family? And you look at family pictures. My wife is really good with that. I stink. I really do. I look at things and she goes, oh, they've got Grandpa's nose. Okay. So-and-so's got somebody's ears, and so we want to know about that. And that's great. I think that knowledge will drive you to where you want to learn more about your genealogy or your family history. And perhaps there's family secrets. You say, I want to know about those. And I know there's some people that are adopted, and they want to know about their family. That's a tough one. I've not dealt with that yet, but in my research, and I think they really want to get a sense of who they are. So, I wish luck to everybody on that. That'd be great. So really, for today, guys, just think about your goal. Why do you want to get into this? And I think next time on the next one, we're going to just kind of start discussing where do we get started. So for the next one, what we're going to do is we're going to look at file systems and just kind of getting your records, what stuff you want to do, first steps, okay? So until next time, bye.